Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the NJ21st briefing. We skipped last week because municipal budgets hit hard and there was a lot of bean counting and chasing to do. Um, we're waiting on 6 more budgets from the state on the other districts in our dashboard. We did get Berkeley Heights, and we're also waiting on three or four budgets on the municipal level, like the full 26 budgets. But we're back here again this week, and really, the last sort of update that we gave played itself out the way everyone predicted. Uh, the big story at the state level this week still is the budget, and still on education, although labor is also showing up. So on Wednesday, the Assembly Budget Committee is going to hear from the Department of Education and the School Development Authority. Legislators are going to meet on that 10 a.m. April 15th. So the School Board Association, the New Jersey School Board Association, which we're not really big fans of, but we watch them, reported that the commissioner is going to testify during that meeting. So it's going to set us up for a usual budget hearing, agency testimony, questions from lawmakers or legislators, a lot of talk about how money is going to be proposed and where it's going. The biggest thing to watch there is going to be school aid and school construction money. The governor said in March that the 27 budget includes about 12.4 billion in K to 12 formula aid. She also said, or the governor also said, that no district was going to lose more than 3% under the proposal. There's also a ceiling, so some schools are going to win, some schools are going to lose, but they're trying to add some stability to this. And I think the range is, no more than 3% in a cut, no more than 6% in an increase. The administration also said the budget was going to tack on 350 million for school development authority, another 50 million in general fund appropriations for capital grants in SDA districts. So 12.4 billion in K to 12 formula aid with a 6% ceiling, I think, a 3% basement. Also said that there's going to be 350 million for school development authority, another 50 million in the general fund appropriations for capital grants in SDA districts. So those are the top line numbers. Outside of that meeting, there's been a lot of talk about the formula, and two school districts come up a lot. Well, one in connection to this, and one as a sort of peripheral. The one that's most directly connected is Jefferson, where you have a lot of lawmakers, especially from Jefferson, talking about how they're going to lose their athletics programming under this formula, or have. So when we looked at their ACFR, which is basically a record of what a district spent. So the ACFR is really an important document because many times school districts deviate significantly from the budgets they show the public. The public doesn't really get an update because the ACFR isn't reviewed in public with as much detail as the ACFR, the budget. The ACFR is an audit that's usually approved by the board, quietly slips through. The budget gets a presentation, but the two documents don't often match. The budget is the plan, the ACFR is the reality. In any case, when I looked at the ACFR from Jefferson, it showed that they spent about $500,000 on security, and that their central administration spending was also through the roof compared to our 7 district average. And our 7 district average has a bunch of schools that spend a lot of money. It's not like we're looking at like folks who penny pinch here. Berkeley Heights, Milburn, New Providence. Berkeley Heights spent an obscene amount of money on security as well. And Jefferson, I think, is kind of comparable to some of those towns in terms of its crime rate. So based on what I researched, so it doesn't seem like there's a lot of justification for that amount of security spending. If we brought those two areas down to what the 7 district average would be, it would mean that Jefferson would get about 600. It looks like Jefferson would get about $600,000 in savings that they could apply to their athletics program. So all of this to say that when we hear school districts talking about how unfair the formula is, that may very well be true. And again, I don't have an intimate knowledge of Jefferson. I want to qualify that. Uh, However, in my own experience in looking at district budgets, the ones that I am very familiar with, there is a lot of bad spending that really doesn't relate to what kids need. So I think, the message has to be better than we're going to lose our athletics program. I think if districts are going to fight this, they need to really kind of make a case as to how all this spending and what really feels like like we know that security theater doesn't work and all these programs that don't work, how all that spending is justified. So I'm not saying every complaint about the funding formula is fake, but I do think that the debate needs to be more informed. Um, and it's hard to buy the narrative the narrative of school poverty when you look at some of these budgets and where the money is going, especially in administration and security. The other story connected to this peripherally is Newark. And Newark spent a ton of money on a building. And Tap Into Newark, there are some Tap Intos that do a really good job. Tap Into Newark is one of those outlets. They got emails from the district that almost suggested the reason why they bought that building was simply to stave off increased enrollments in charter schools. One email referred to the situation of like all these kids leaving Newark public schools to go to charter as sort of a quote unquote nightmare. So, this idea of, oh my God, we really need money, this formula. And Newark, I think, probably would be one of the beneficiaries of this formula anyway. But, there's just a lot of, bad spending for bad reasons. And I'm not really firm on this formula being a bad thing. There's a part of me that wonders whether this would be a good way for districts to finally, or nudge districts to finally be more, fiscally disciplined. Anyway, um, going back to the state legislature and the Senate this time, labor is also on the radar. And, the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee is going to hear from the Department of Labor and Workforce Development on April 16th at 10 a.m. And this one matters too because the state's own numbers have been kind of mixed. On April 2nd, the DOL reported that they were adjusting the 2025 job growth estimate down. The January 2026 estimate showed about 6,000 jobs increased on payroll. So that kind of shows this little bit of a story where you have an unemployment rate in December of 5.4%, with an unemployment rate in January of 5.2%, and that shows progress. But the thing to remember is that January's numbers can also be revised down. So it is a mixed picture. Jersey's been tracking back behind the rest of the nation when it comes to employment numbers. I think it was either last month or early this month, we talked about how layoff notices this year are already for the first 3 months outpacing the last 3 years. So this is the biggest thing to watch on the state side, and not just this one meeting, but looking at employment throughout the year. So moving away from what's happening in Trenton, we're going to go to Cherry Hill, which kind of finds itself in one of the biggest OPRA stories of the state. And they're suing a journalist, Ben Shore. This guy's a 25-year-old kid. They're actually looking at, I mean, it's really kind of a bad situation. The district is seeking a protective order against this young journalist that would limit his ability to file OPRA requests. And this has been highly covered by the New Jersey Monitor, New Jersey Spotlight News. I think the New Jersey Vindicator also might have put a story out there. I'm not sure. And this is what we warned people about in 2024. Under Scutari and Sarlo's amendments, we were really worried that this was going to be a pathway for agencies to really punish folks for asking for records, and with the intent of just silencing them. And we talked about how this was going to be used against journalists and watchdogs, and this is a really good example. Ben Shore, from what New Jersey Monitor reported, I think submitted like 12 or 14 requests in 1 year. That's like one and a half a month. I mean, that is like far, far from unreasonable. There's just when you're doing journalism, Oprah requests are part of it if you're a watchdog or investigative outlet. There's just no way to do this work without Oprah requests, especially when you consider how New Jersey governments work. They don't they aren't necessarily showing what they're doing. There are some municipalities, for example, that didn't even have their 2025 budgets available without submitting a request for approval into a Google Drive. When we Oprah requests for school districts budgets for the last 3 years, it's been a battle. It's been back and forth. So this was the situation was already bad, even under the law that was better. With these amendments, uh, journalists are going to actually have to file more Oprah requests because municipalities and districts are kind of feeling emboldened to hide more because, hey, listen, let them submit as many Oprah requests as they can. And when they hit that ceiling or when they hit a certain number, we're going to go after them and sue them because they're unreasonable. We actually saw this playing out in Berkeley Heights, or, I'm not, I can't say that that's intentional, but, at the last town council meeting, you see that you have the town administrator saying, well, just submit an Oprah request in the face of a reasonable request for information in a town council meeting. So they want you to submit Oprah requests and build it up, and they just use tax dollars to fund attorneys to take you to court. Berkeley Heights increased last year its Oprah attorneys. I have to look at the budget this year. Um, and you had one council member, when they lost the lawsuit, talk about how they wanted to fight it this year. On a well-established precedent around private emails and public business. Like, you had one council member, Pogue, who is willing to appeal what's been long established law. Um, so this is not going to be a good situation. Luckily for us, CJ Griffin, who's an excellent Oprah attorney, um, is handling Ben Shore's case, and that's one positive on our side. Probably the best attorney. Him and her and Walter Lors are probably the best Oprah attorneys in New Jersey, as far as I can tell. So we're in good hands. Now, just to make the point even clearer with Cherry Hill, we actually sent them an Oprah request because we wanted to find out, listen, how many Oprah requests does this district really get? And we asked for records for 2025, every Oprah request that was submitted and the records that they responded with. And they came back saying, well, you have to pay $1,000 for that because there's so much work involved. We've made similar requests to other public bodies, never got charged. But the contradiction here is important. Um, they're claiming, or kind of putting an anchor in being cost conscientious when disclosing public information they've already given out. It's already there. Yet they have no problem spending tax dollars to go after a journalist who's basically doing their job, using the law in a way that is it's intended. I mean, it's not using Oprah to harass them or anything. He's making relevant requests. For example, for us, I think we submitted maybe 14 requests to the municipality last year, maybe even 20. But each one of those Oprah requests connected to an important story. Sewage leakages, the bond proposal that ended up backfiring on the flooding, the turf field controversy. All of those things were meaningful and relevant stories that Berkeley Heights residents would have had no way of knowing about if we hadn't submitted the requests. So we're crossing our fingers on this one and hope that the judges are going to be reasonable on this. Judges so far tend to be on the side of transparency. We'll see where that lands. Anyway, that's the three things to sort of think about for this past week. Um, the state budget, education and labor this week, and the Cherry Hill situation. A couple of things on the site. Laura's doing an excellent job covering the CMS turf field or sports complex controversy. We created a section on what we're watching for that. We also created a what we're watching section on municipal budgets that's sort of comparing 7 municipalities and their 26 budgets and their 2024 ACFR spending. So a lot of good stuff on the site if you want to check it out. All right, guys, thank you for your time and for your support.